Change is hard, but often the biggest contributor to how successful a change is for us is how we react to that change. If we moan and say life's so unfair, then the change will probably not work out well for us. But if we see it as an exciting opportunity, then it'll probably have a better outcome. In this video, I'm going to talk not about how you should deal with change, but how you as a leader can help the people you lead deal with change. Hey, how's it going? This is Scruffy Leadership, a YouTube channel about management and leadership aimed particularly at software engineers. My name's Ben and I've been a leader and a manager in the tech industry for over 25 years. As a leader, dealing with change is doubly hard. You don't just have to manage your own reactions to the change, you also have to help other people through it. Some people are more resilient to change than others, but for almost anyone, there's at least some kinds of change that will be hard. And when that happens to your people, your job is to help them get the best possible outcome following that change. I think there's a few key things that are essential to leading through change. First, clarity. You might not be the person that initiated the change, but you probably are responsible, at least in part, for communicating it. Being clear about what the change is and what it isn't is critical. If you know a negative implication of the change, don't try to hide it. Instead, find a way to communicate it along with a message of how you will support people through that change or that aspect of the change, what you'll do to help them manage it. And if the change is affecting different people to different degrees, make sure you're clear about that too. And in order to do that, you need to understand the people you lead. You need to know what motivates them, what they like and dislike at work, what their ambitions are. If you know these things, it's much easier to anticipate what objections or difficulties each person will have in regard to the change, which means you can be more prepared to help them through it. And that means you need to listen. First of all, you should have been listening to the people you lead since you started leading them, but now that the change is happening, you need to listen to them even more intently. And don't just listen, look out for what they're not saying. So if you have a one-to-one with someone during a big change and you ask them how they're doing and they give you a kind of monosyllabic answer, push them a bit harder. You might say, "How are you really doing? There's a big change going on and I know not everyone's finding it easy." You need to be able to figure out who's handling the change well and who's struggling so you know where to focus your attention. But don't make the mistake of assuming that anyone is unaffected by the change. If there's a big organizational change, even someone whose role is not directly affected can still have an emotional reaction to that change and might still need your support and help. Some kinds of changes can be really hard for almost everyone, and there are some people that find pretty much any change hard. And it's important to be empathetic and understanding when you listen to people's reactions. It's not okay to dismiss someone's feelings as an overreaction, but it is okay to say, "I get it, change is hard," and to show the person that you've heard what they're feeling and that you understand, even if you can't just make the change go away. Now, up until now, I've talked mostly about listening, and that should be the priority, but you'll also need to do some talking. And one of the key things you'll need to be able to do is to explain the reasoning behind the change, the why. And that's true whether you're the one who initiated the change or if you're just the messenger. And it's true whether you agree with the change or not. Whatever the case, you need to be able to justify the change, explain why it's happening. Not everyone will necessarily like the explanation, but at least they'll know. And if you have a good relationship with them as a manager or a leader, they'll find it easier to challenge the explanation, to really dig into it to satisfy themselves. Be willing to change your mind. This only really applies, obviously, if the change is coming from you. If you've initiated a change, you shouldn't be too quick to reverse it just because someone doesn't like it. But on the other hand, if you get some compelling data that shows that the change was a bad idea, you should be willing to at least entertain the idea of undoing it. Changing your mind is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of flexibility and security. It's not always possible to change a change, but when it is, it's a good thing to consider. Finally, a tool that can be really helpful for leading through change is the change curve. It's based on the 5 stages of grief you might have heard of, which came from a 1969 book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And it was later modified into a 7 or sometimes 8 stage curve to describe the states that people go through when dealing with change. I'm not going to go into the 7 stages in detail in this video, but the point I want to make is that everyone goes through this change curve at different rates. This was really noticeable to me when the COVID-19 lockdown happened. Within a few weeks, quite a few of my colleagues had gone all the way through the change curve and were fully comfortable with the new ways of working, while others were still pretty much in shock and denial. This is to be expected, and it's not a sign there's something wrong with those latter people or that there's a right or a wrong way to go through the change curve. Rather, it's just important to know that everyone handles it differently, and you as a leader should be ready to help each person from whatever stage they're in through to the end of the change curve. The other point I want to make about it is the y-axis. This is how well the person is doing. And the point is that as they progress through the early stages of the change curve, aside from a brief upward blip when they're in denial, their morale is going to be dropping. And this may well lead to a drop in performance as well. And again, this is okay. It's natural. And your job is not to berate them for it, but to help them through it, to help them get from the left-hand side of the curve to the right-hand side of the curve. As I mentioned earlier, when there's a big change that you don't necessarily agree with, you still might be in a position where you need to be ready to justify it. And the idea behind this is called disagree and commit. And to find out what I mean by that, check out the video that's on screen now. And please let me know about your experiences with leading through change in the comments below. I'd love to hear about them. Bye. See you soon.